We have a hell of a lot of workshops and fun things planned for you tonight, as well as the investigation. But now we're going to have a look at filming and image analysis. It's a good start, isn't it? Image analysis. And I'm going to actually pass you over to one of our cameramen, Rob, who has done some filming for Haunted Devon. Some of his work is playing at the moment. And he's going to do a short little workshop on how to film of a night time and how to use the camcorders. So, Rob?
Thank you very much. Hello everyone, can you all hear me all right?
No.
All right, no? Okay, I'll shout louder. Yeah, so I'm Rob. I'm a cameraman, photographer by trade. In terms of the paranormal, I've been working in the industry about 20 years now, something like that. Most recently, obviously, with HD, but I've been involved in all sorts of groups and productions over the years, which it's quite interesting to see the way that people handle filming differently, if you will. So that's where I'm kind of coming from. You'll have to excuse me if I seem a bit scatty. I've got my notes here. I'm doing another presentation in about 2 hours' time, so I'm trying to make sure I give you guys the right presentation and I'll talk to you about beavers, which will be really, really different. I'm sorry. So basically, I'm going to assume you've all got a mixed background knowledge of filming, particularly with investigations you do. So I'm going to cover the basics. If you'd like to know anything more detailed, I'm more than happy for my contact details to be handed out, and I can certainly help people if you're stuck with sort of picking up the camera. But as you can see with this, and this is an event we did at Cold Harbour last year, the principle behind filming an investigation is really quite important. You've got some really good opportunities with a camera to document evidence, particularly if you get any activity happening. Now, just because the camera doesn't pick the activity up doesn't mean to say that it can be used to establish who was stood where you were in the building, and how, what was happening. You can also use it to pick up in the background. So if you've heard something on an audio recording and it's within the vicinity that the camera's been, cameras are really good to do that. These days, the infrared on cameras is really good. I've got a little handy cam in my hand. That one is my bigger camera. They're all following the same principle. You've got an infrared light, which the camera has a sensor within it to pick up the infrared. I won't go into the details, I don't think we need to here. And it produces an image. Some of you may remember from the early ghost films, sorry to use that term, but under stuff in the early days of TV, especially like early day Most Haunted, it used to be green, so people might have seen that, particularly the American ones use green light. A lot of people, especially America, seems to think that infrared you see more in green light. They've got this idea that the human eye can pick it up better. That's not actually so. We always find, particularly with the broadcast work we do, the silver light, because there's a selector in the camera, setting it to a black and white setting is always a good thing to try and do. The reason you do that is you get a decent shadow, so you can actually see the image that you're filming. So that's why it looks the way it is. I'm just skipping through, so take notes if you have any questions. So really we're going to look most focusedly at the way that we use these. So first things first is looking after your equipment. Alright, so these are fragile. If you throw it on the ground, it will break. If you drop it in the river, like I've done to one of mine recently, it will stop working. When you're working on an investigation, you're going to be working in the dark. So the first thing you want to do is know how to use the camera. So familiarise yourself with any one that you get given. These are really simple. So you've got a flip screen. You can see through the flip screen where you're going. But have make sure you spend 5 minutes before the investigation and get it comfortable. Adjust the strap so it sits comfortable in your hand. You don't want it loose, you don't want it wiggling like that. And also know where all the buttons are so that you can press record and you can stop. I'll go into how you hold it later. But you need to sort of have that familiarity of it, and it will help you document much more effectively. Other things as well, the tech guys are going to do their presentation shortly, so it's making sure you've got the batteries charged up and making sure everything's clean. Lenses, one of the worst things you can do is put your finger on the lens like I've just done. And what that does is that'll put a nice greasy mark on it. And then when you're working in infrared, it will look like something, and as you pan, it'll appear as though it's following the camera. And Abby's going to cover all of that in her presentation in a bit. When it comes to filming, your key observation I would make is to know the subject, know what you want to try and do. Alright, so when you're working with a camera, you're going to be filming an investigation, you're going to be filming activities. So have an understanding, particularly if there's more than one person with a camera in the room, have a rough understanding as to what you want to do. So say me and Abby were filming at the moment, a good place for us to be would be opposite or like this in the room, one filming in one direction, one in the other. If Abby's at the other end of that room filming towards me and I'm filming towards her, the infrared beams are going to cross and you're going to get a nice big flare across your camera, and again you'll see that a little bit later. So having an understanding of you're in a space, how many people have got a camera. If it's just you, that's good. If it's another person, work with them to try and balance out where you're going to be within a space. And the classic example right there's only one of us working and the beam's going that way, but you can actually go around there, so around the corner. So if there's a second camera, as the camera pans, it's going to hit a big flare. And later on, if we've forgotten there's two people, we might be looking back at that footage thinking it was something going across, and it won't be. It'll be just that. So when you're holding it, very often you're going to be using these small cameras. So when you're holding the camera, you want to be thinking of a few things. So first of all, you've learnt where all the buttons are. The important one, record and how to stop. Believe it or not, there's loads of people who've gone classic footage where they will press record. The second one is the zoom. Never zoom with these things when they're on infrared. You want to walk towards the subject, not zoom into it, because the more you zoom into an infrared beam, the more the thing just falls to pieces. So make sure your finger stays away from the zoom, because in the dark, a lot of the time, in my early days when we were filming this sort of activity, my finger would slip onto the zoom and the camera would slowly start to zoom out. And as it zooms out, the beam then, you end up disintegrating the footage and it doesn't work. When you're filming, keep your camera in like this, palm at the bottom of that. Tuck your elbows in and make yourself as steady as you can. Now, when you're filming, if you're on, say, like a full hour, it can get really uncomfortable, so don't be afraid to sort of make sure you're moving around a bit. But if you're trying to keep a steady shot, lean against something and have your hands into your chest like that, and what that'll do is instantly steady the camera. They do have steadying facilities within it, and it will keep it from shaking too much, but keep it tight. And the importance of that is when you're filming and documenting, what you don't want to do is to start shaking, which is what a lot of the footage that we often see, even in professional cameras that aren't used to night vision photography. They work a lot in wildlife, and we've seen numerous people come in and they're trying to document something that's happening and their camera's going because they can't see at night, and these screens won't tell you if you've got vibration. So when you come to review the footage and you're looking at evidence, a shaky camera again, it will give you false, all sorts. What else? So if you're going to tracking, so if you're filming like this and if we're just in one corner, I can probably keep it going 10-15 minutes, nice and steady. But if someone is, if we're going to pan around a room and we're going to start to track, don't do that. Just nice and slowly, and that will pan backwards and forwards. Keep it slow and keep it into your body. Don't worry about doing that or trying to do that, because at night it doesn't work when you're on infrared. These things don't respond to them. So keep it nice and slow and keep it tight, and that will give you a nice panning shot. If you're then trying to follow a group, so one of the favourite shots of a lot of people is they're trying to follow a group of people through a room and you're trying to document as you're going through. Bend your knees and practice it. It's a bit strange, it's not easy to get used to, but once you get used to it, you want to try to bend your knees, soften your step, hold your camera in, sort of waddle like a duck. And what that does is it stops the camera from jarring up and down. And again, if you're trying to do a nice panning shot, mostly when you're trying to document a site, what it does is it keeps it from rocking up and down. So if you do get something, what you don't end up is wrecking the footage. And I've seen stuff being caught that's been wrecked because the camera's all over the place when they've done that. If you want to try and practice how to use a camera and move so you get a steady shot, one of the tricks is not at dark, but in the light, one of the tricks is actually to walk backwards. and hold it, because the motion of moving backwards is actually the same sort of idea, and what you'll find is you'll get a lovely smooth pan of the room, but don't do that at night. The other thing not to do, and I've got 3 fractured ribs doing this, is walking downstairs, not having a torch and not using it, and I use the infrared light through the screen thinking I could go downstairs. And what HD don't know is the first time we went round real cinema, I fell down the stairs and cracked 3 ribs and ended up having to film the rest of the night with 3. And I did, and my camera I saved, and as I saved my camera I went down sideways. Have a torch on, have it on red light if you can. Red light is a really good complement for your infrared filming, because white light will blow your vision and then you're trying to focus and you won't see the camera, you just see this glowing screen. Nice red light means you can keep this operating and you don't lose your night vision. If you use a bright white light on a camera which is running on infrared, you can burn the sensor out as well, so I don't think they'd like you at doing that. So there's just a couple of techniques to do. The other thing as well, sorry I know this is a bit rushed, there's an awful lot, it's a huge subject. You'll see some cameras like this, so this is what we've got a few of. This is like a basic gimbal, and what this does is it just extends that body posture, so instead of having it all conked in, you have a nice sort of smooth object where you can hold, and if you practice with this later, you'll see what I mean. Try and do it like that, and then try and tuck it in, and you'll find it weighs nothing at all. Light, so it's up and out. There's no danger of you putting your hand here. Again, when you're using these things, if they're small like this, and you've got big hands like me, you can actually put your hand over the infrared lamp and you won't know you've got shadow. One of the footage is actually somewhere in there, and on the film we did for reel, the second time we went to reel, you'll see I've got a shotgun mic lamp put on the camera. And what it does is it causes a shadow on the wall, so you just see the microphone every 5 minutes and it looks like there's something following it. It's not, it's just the microphone. So it does help if you sort of get a bit of practice. And then I think the last, I think we'll leave it, sorry?
Yeah,
oh, yes!
Yeah. Black legging.
Yeah.
Couple of things.
You got a good ear in it, yeah.
Yeah. So you've probably been seeing some of this footage and thinking half the crew walk around naked at night.
I just said that to you, didn't I?
Black tight clothing, you will look naked. There's no other way of saying it. I don't think we'll get a shot. We might do in a minute. So if you're another thing to think, a couple of things to think about. That's a really good. Thank you. Actually, that's a really good shot right there. So you're filming equipment. If you're filming equipment, make sure you get in and show the equipment. Don't zoom, move. See, you'll see under the table. See, don't want to embarrass her, but she looks like she's not wearing anything. And that's one of the fundamental problems when you're using infrared. Anyone that has tight-fitting clothing, especially if it's black, will immediately look as if they don't have anything on at all. So,
bras can show up in the jumpies
can
as
be,
well.
yeah, it can be. It can be a problem. So it's just being familiar with. If you see on the camera it's having that effect, and it actually doesn't always happen. You normally see it only after when you're editing. Obviously, try not to film them because it just makes it a lot easier, and it's not embarrassing for people. But when you're filming equipment, again, don't zoom in. Use yourself. Come in over somebody's shoulder. If you're holding come down over their shoulder and have a look, because the camera can pick up what you're seeing. And if you're using instruments, it really helps the audience. If you're filming it to be used, it helps the audience member to sort of understand. And get low down as well. Change your angles. Don't worry about just standing and sitting. Try and move about a bit, because you can get some really interesting shots in terms of the building and the setup when you're doing an investigation. So really, I think that's probably about it. Again, like I said, if you want to speak to me independently, that's really cool. If anyone wants to do any research, we were going to show a film called The Pembroke Voice here, but we couldn't get it running, weirdly enough. So if anyone wants to, go on YouTube and Google The Pembroke Voice. It came out, some of you may have already heard it. Came out about, it must have been nearly 10, 15 years ago now, something like that. I was part of the crew that filmed it. Now, what is really interesting is that has not got, there were 4 professional cameramen down in that place where this place was filmed, and 1 professional sound recorder. Who do you think got the sound? The sound recorder. The camera people, the whole thing fell to pieces, because as soon as it started, and you can make your own minds up as to whether it's real or not, but as soon as that event started, all the crew down there heard it, And when they heard it, the first thing they did, all of them turned their cameras to the ground. So there is no visual documentary whatsoever of that activity, so there's no proof that there wasn't anyone stood at the stairs. So have a look at that, see what you think. And when you play it, you're playing it, if you want to play it, think about you as a camera operator in that situation. So there's a reason you don't see anything in there, and that is because the crew immediately dropped their cameras because they were just petrified, I think this is what it is. They were kind of just staring. Well, that's true, and I don't know how I'd react in that because I was in a different part of the castle when it happened. But
You heard it from that part, though.
we heard it from that point. But the principle would have been to keep the camera going, and I use it as a really good example of what happens when human instinct takes over. And if you're looking at news footage and you're looking at any activities, you'll see a lot of the footage is phone footage, and it's drifting off, and whatever's happening is happening over here, and your phone's going this way, and it's because people tend to stare and they tend to drop. As you learn more about filming and photography, you have to try and overcome that instinct to drop it. So we tend to sit, we have to learn to sort of sit and do that, even if something's coming charging towards you, because if you don't get the evidence.
Richard Hammond's crash, case in point.
Yeah. Anyone watched Top Gear and you saw Richard Hammond go off on the his electric car? You didn't see it because they turned the cameras off just after he passed the finishing line. So, real one, actually, we were filming, and I can't show you that one unfortunately today, but we do have it.
We were up in the projector room, weren't we?
Up in the projector room, we just done a 15-minute investigation up there. I had the camera rolling, got some great shots of the projector house. And as we turn, normally what I do is when the group's finished and turning, I'll turn the camera, and as I walk out, trick of mine is to keep the camera on hold, keep it recording, and walk outwards, and it's facing behind me, so if anything does happen, which normally they throw something at you, it does get it. Only on this occasion I turned the camera off, and as we walked out through the door, something came flinging through the room and into the door itself, and all you see is about 30 seconds later when everyone's going, what the hell's that? So that's another classic example. Of something else I'd say is don't be worried about the amount of recording you're doing. If you are on an investigation, you don't need to start. If there's memory in the camera, keep running it. Because you don't know what you'll get in terms of evidence. You know, so. Anyway, massive subject condensed down into a really small ball. Thank you very much.
Can I ask, did you say Pembroke Voice?
Pembroke Voice.
Pembroke, what was the location?
Pembroke Castle.
Pembroke Castle.
Yeah, if you go on, it's on YouTube, Pembroke Voice, it's an old film, and you'll know it's the one, it's got a picture of Pembroke Keep on it, and it starts with some typewritery words.
It was spirit level, wasn't it?
We won't go into that, but there's it's a long story associated to that, but that's what you're looking for. It's only a minute long. But as I said, watch it, by all means make your own minds up. I'm not going to say which way it went. You'll see, if you haven't heard it, you'll see what we mean.
I'd watch it with the lights on.
But picture yourself in that, picture yourself in a similar environment. Remember, this is a full TV crew. We were filming for one of the living shows at that point. And there's a sound operator, a boom. Even he dropped his, but what he has obviously is he's got the audio, so you can hear the audio. But in terms of, and one of the problems that we had with when that rolled out, a lot of people called foul because it's a professional TV company, and no one filmed it. And no one filmed it because 4 professional camera people didn't drop the cameras; they just turned them to point at the ground. And there's an old debate about how and why, but that's why. And then of course, when everyone turned around and went, "Where's the footage?" all you do is see the bloody wall going everywhere and the ground, and then everyone runs out. And the cameras are running out like that, so you just need to stay. So you don't see anything.
So they did actually see stuff? They just
No, they heard it.
They just heard it?
They heard it, and
Brah.
yes.
Was it West Midlands that played it on there, and then they were
Yeah,
like,
it
"You should have played that"?
It did. It aired on East Midlands today, and they haven't listened to it when it aired, and it terrified everyone. It is basically, it's an audio recording of someone screaming "Let me out," but it goes on for about 30 seconds. It actually rumbled on for about a minute when it was actually running. But because everyone had run, they'd run through whatever the source was. But they're trapped in an underground cavern. There's no way out. There's only one way out. And of course, as soon as it kicked off, the first thing they had to do human instinct is they ran, and they ran out of the castle. In fact, we had to go and get a few of them. They were outside on the street. So it was quite an interesting episode in terms of technical and ability, in terms of the way that everybody operated during it. And one of the reasons we were going to show it is to give you an idea of what happens when you do start turning over stones. One day you can film something, so practicing your reaction will help you in trying to capture it. I know it sounds a bit daft, but believe me, when you are finding you're getting involved in something, you will drop your camera. And that's, I don't mean drop it, I mean you'll lower it, because you're looking to see what's going on. And it's overcoming the instinct to keep the camera up, and then that captures the evidence that you're looking for. Right.
Well, thank you for that, Rob. That,
Yeah,
was,
thanks.
that was really interesting.
Yeah, cheers.
I hope it was. You keep talking.
Can we have the speech by the audience now, please?
Yeah.
Set up that the environmental person had done here, and he wasn't was dead. But he wasn't, well, he died in trance.
Have we got any names?
I can't remember in the notes myself.
How to use the camera, we can start to analyse some of the images that you can get. When dealing with your own evidence, you have to be your own harshest critic. To be able to rule out the environmental and the mechanical that can cause artefacts before we can label something as anomalous. So let's first look at orbs, a contentious subject for everybody, yeah? Or light anomalies. There are many aspects that can cause orbs, from dust particles, moisture, pollen, lens flare, insects, the wrong camera settings, dirt, and light itself. But let's look at dust, everybody's favourite, shall we? Next slide, please. There we go. As you can see, these appear in a variety of different ways and sizes, from large to small. The larger particles tend to be closer to the lens. If an object is closer to the lens, it appears bigger. If it's further away in your depth of field, it will appear smaller. You can also see there are many varieties of intensity, from your more opaque and translucent to your very solid and what many people think are self-illuminating, but this is where it's caught off your flash or IR. First you have to look at the environment you're in. I'm sorry, but everywhere has dust particles. I don't care how clean it is. Have you ever seen dust in the sunlight or in a beam of light? You see them all floating around. She's going to kill me for this is my friend. But as you can see behind her, we have a dust particle orb there, and incidentally it's got a bit of a space on it. But that links into pareidolia. This is the brain's wiring to recognise, to see faces, but more on that in a bit. Often I get the comment in videos and footage that I'm sent that they believe it's not dust by the erratic way it moves in the air. But you've got to take into account the different air currents that are in the room, especially if we're moving around and stuff like that, which will make dust particles change direction and behave erratically. Slide 4. Also, if you're investigating a location that's been renovated or there's a lot of dirt or debris about, you can expect a lot of these artefacts on your image. And that one was one of the offices at the New Palace Theatre, I believe, Kelly.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, yeah. Next one, please. Now we're going to talk moisture particles. The atmosphere is filled with moisture molecules that cannot be seen with the naked eye, but these can be captured by a camera lens. Some moisture orbs are octagon or spherical, but not all, and there can be a variety of shape and colours as well. Moisture reflects light like a prism, causing a rainbow of colours. However, not all water molecules have colours in them, and here we have some images of Holy Trinity Church. Where I've captured some moisture particles in the air. It was drizzling at the time. And the next one. Incidentally, that's where the church was actually hit by lightning. I just think it's a bit of a coincidence there that we just got a big moisture particle right where it hit. And we've got some there at night. As you can see on that one there, you're getting the prism effect with the different colours in it.
Mm.
So obviously note if it's raining, if you have temperature and humidity. If you haven't got a gauge that actually does this, or a hygrometer, a very, very simple test to do is to hold your camera up and take a flash and look through the beam that way. That way you can actually see any moisture particles or dust particles in the air, so you can tell if it's a high humidity, if you're getting a lot of the sparkles in the flash itself. Don't look directly at the flash because you'll be seeing orbs for the next 2 hours. Now, certain camera setups are more likely to capture such artefacts than others due to the flash's proximity to the lens. When the flash is close to the lens, as you can see here, the cone of light that it puts out interacts with the conical shape coverage of the lens. This overlapping area is where dust particles or airborne droplets or tiny insects will become visible as orbs. Here we can see another diagram of how this occurs. As you can see here, you've got your focal point, your depth of field, which is only a certain distance from the camera, the dust particle there in front, the lens flash, the reflect from the light unit, the camera lens, and it will actually appear as a out of focus orb. Here we have some excerpts from Sony Cybershot Handbook explaining this effect and also how to adjust your camera settings to be able to negate this. And I think we've got one there. There we go. Next one. To negate this effect, it's best practice to mount an external flash where possible, or an external illuminator away from the lens, just to eliminate this beam from capturing these artifacts. As you can see here, we try to mount as away from the lens itself, so you are not getting this crossover, so you're not getting as much of the dust reflected off the IR beam. If you can't do that, maybe adjust your settings or just discount what you capture as dust or moisture. Next one. Insects. As you can see, bugs can take on many strange shapes and forms. They've caused more controversy on footage with the so-called phenomena of rods. With filming in low light or using IR, the camera can only see at 30 frames per second. And this can actually, in these conditions, can distort and elongate the appearance of insects as it moves through the air. I've got a short clip here of the New Palace Theatre, the security camera that they thought they caught a ghost. They asked us to actually see what we thought about this, and our debunk was featured in the Plymouth Herald, so I'll let you just play that one there. From my analysis of this, it is a moth, as you can see the individual wing beats through the actual anomaly itself. and the moth is actually being illuminated by the IR light as well as being attracted to it. So you can see the individual wing beats there. Because believe it or not, they do get attracted to the IR lights as well as ordinary bright ones. There is a lot of controversy at the minute in which Rob has in his job with filming wildlife, is using the intensity of IR beams. So how much is that actually causing animals that can see in the dark to their eyes? We're using these strong high intensity IR lights when filming nature in the dark. Okay. Here we have a short clip from the History Channel, who actually did an experiment to debunk and explain this phenomena. You might need to turn your volume up a little. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Just move out of the way a second while that's doing that.
Peter Schmitz and the high-speed camera test may reveal the answer to this mystery. As a crew member shakes the bushes and lawn to get more bugs moving through the field of view, rods suddenly appear on the standard camera. They have been hiding in the foliage. This camera expert has caught a rod simultaneously on both a high-speed and standard speed camera. As a crew member stirs the surrounding foliage, rods appear first as just a streak, but when moving closer to the camera and the light source, the image takes on a more rod-like form. The high-speed camera has been rolling as well, at 1,000 frames per second, compared to the 30 frames per second camera. The source is revealed, a moth. By having the split-second clock readout in both camera views, you could match the exact object in both cameras.
We did capture a few images that were very telling. Images that appeared to be rods, but when we looked at them more closely with the high-speed video, determined they were nothing more than a bug flying through our field of view.
In this series of digital still photos shot by Anders Jelevik in Malmo, Sweden, a rod swoops down to the water. As he increases the shutter speed during successive exposures, the rod clearly is seen as a seagull, but when he decreases the shutter speed, it becomes a rod again.
Pictures don't lie, or cameras don't lie, and that's not necessarily true. They do the best they can to tell the truth.
Mike Bergeron is an engineer with Panasonic Broadcasting, a company that manufactures cameras. But if rods are all known objects distorted by the camera, why are they not seen all the time?
A camera can be fooled just as your eyes can be fooled. Different things might fool the camera that wouldn't fool your eyes if you were there. And a camera, especially a modern digital camera, it makes assumptions about what it thinks pictures ought to do in a normal situation. Now, occasionally it guesses wrong, and it creates things that aren't there.
And what about the Mexican cave video, where birds, bugs, and rods are all seen in the same field of view at the same time?
The moving objects that are most likely to cause a double image artifact or a motion blur artifact are the objects that are moving the fastest from the camera's point of view. The things that will appear to be moving the fastest from the camera's perspective are things right in front of it. So they don't have to be going that fast to be going very fast as far as the imager is concerned. If they're moving fast enough, they can get a motion blur where they are in many places at once in the course of one exposure.
The reason rods are only found occasionally is because you need just the right mix of object speed, distance from the camera, shutter speed, and light.
Okay, incorrect camera settings or motion of an artifact can also produce some strange anomalies. Orbs can also be a retro-reflection of light off an object, but light itself can cause an orb in a photograph, such as a light source like your lamppost or a reflection of a camera flash. It's also good practice to try and rule out another person's flashlight in the distance, reflecting off a wall or window or mirror or any kind of reflective surface. So let's talk flares, shall we? So here we go. Lens flares is simply light that's being reflected through multiple glass pieces within your camera lens. There is an outside light source, apart from your camera's flash, in the photo, such as the sun, the moon, a lamp, fire, flashlight, or even your own camera's flash being reflected off a mirror. A modern camera lens is actually an assemblage of multiple lenses called elements, and they're housed in a barrel like so. Lens flare is created when light reflects off one or more of many lenses. The more light you have in your camera, the more light you have to allow in, the more pronounced the flares will be. If you shoot with a lens hood, you can prevent this, not entirely, but it does reduce it. Now, these images were taken from an article on photography on lens flares. This uses arrows to point out some of the less obvious flares that you might not notice, such as the corner. You can see the big light, the top one there, around it. On the top right photo, you notice the green. You don't notice the green orb as the camera is far away. So it's very small, whereas below it's up close. It appears much larger. The flares will be exaggerated and change shape depending on where your camera is positioned and the angle. I'm going to show a few more slides now. As a member of ours, Jenny, she sent me in some photos, her and Martin, saying they've got this green anomaly with the sparklers that were dotting around in different positions, but as you can see, it is the lens flare from the sparkler there. And the next one. And these were taken at Stonehenge at the summer solstice. As you can see, the lower the light, it will be more of a reddy colour. The brighter the light, this when you tend to get your purples and your greens and your blues. So you can see there the lens flare directly above it, and also the big blotches below. And again there, you've got the large lens flare at the bottom, and the tiny dot there at the top. These can actually be caught on film as well, as I've seen people mistake them for orbs or UFOs, as the green light tends to move round as you move the camera. In the photo at the bottom right here, it shows how even light being reflected off a surface can still create a lens flare. That's the sun reflecting off the window and going into the camera itself. This can occur with mirrors or any other shiny surface. As you can see here, we've got the sun at solstice at Stonehenge, and down here we've got a lens flare being reflected off this iPhone or smartphone there, as they're actually taking a photo of the sunrise at the solstice. Equipment check. This is Jenny's husband Martin, by the way. It's always a good idea to perform a check of all equipment prior to your investigation. Always check your camera lenses are free from smudges, dust. Always avoid touching the lens with your fingers, as this can leave natural oils, smudges and residue which can cause anomalies in the pictures. These are some of my pictures taken off my phone where it's got dust and debris from being in my handbag basically, and once I cleaned it off these anomalies disappeared. As you can see, because it is closest on the lens and to the flash, it shows up a lot brighter. And again here, and there. That is literally just stuff on my lens. But because it is taken at places where people who associate with paranormal activity and where it does occur, such as Stonehenge or Avebury Stone Circle, where me, Martin and Jenny were, you could actually mistake that as some form of energy and stuff like that you're capturing, but it is literally just dirt on the lens. And once I cleaned it off, it went. Right, we're going to talk a little bit about digital matrixing and noise now in your camera. There are a lot of things that can cause digital noise, but a high ISO in low light conditions is one of the worst contributors. Digital cameras have an ISO setting ranging from about 100 to 3200. By default, your camera will automatically pick the best ISO setting for whatever you're taking a picture of. If it's a bright sunshiny day, you'll use a lower ISO. If it's low light conditions or there are a lot of shadows, it may automatically set a high ISO so it can pick up as much light and information as possible. As you can see here, one of the dangers of this is known as digital matrixing or pareidolia. It's the tendency for incorrect perception of stimulus of an object or a pattern of a meaning to the observer, such as shapes in clouds, seeing faces, in inanimate objects, or in abstract patterns. And as you can see here, this is off a few different Canon cameras, setting the ISO settings. And as you can see on the last one, it just totally blows out with digital pixelation and noise. An example of pareidolia in a high ISO JPEG image. The shape of what appears to be a skull is partially visible, as you note in, you can't really see it there, as you note in, as you zoom in. You've taken a photo with your camera, you're in a low light conditions. Your phone or camera has introduced a lot of digital noise through high ISO, which has then been concentrated, smoothed, and modelled into patterns of shadows by the photo JPEG compression itself. You see something that looks a bit odd in the photo, you enlarge it, you zoom in, these two blotches here, or these two dark ones next to it, they could be eyes. It looks like a mouth underneath it. There you go, you've instantly got a face. Pareidolia can cause people to interpret random images or patterns of light as shadows as faces. Here you can see what appears to be a face in these images, in the mist and the smoke. These tend to be more of an issue with outdoor investigations, when you are subject to temperature and changes and weather condition changes and more moisture in the air. So to be sure to do test shots, keep an eye on the weather obviously. Is the mist around you or even condensation on your lens can cause some of these effects. When myself and Rob were actually taking night shots down by a pool of water, we were doing astrophotography, a lot of the images came out with this mist on it, and that's because it got them cold, we were by a body of water, and the lens was just basically condensating up. Also, your own breath can cause this kind of artifact in your image. So if you're taking a photo, hold the camera away from your mouth instead of holding it up close, because as you exhale, this can cause this effect as it reflects off the camera flash in cooler conditions. And you might not even be able to see your own breath in there, but the camera will pick it up. So also be aware of smoking and vaping. This kind of smoke does hang around in the air longer, although you might not be able to see it with the naked eye anymore, like your moisture particles. It can get illuminated by the flash, and your brain can interpret that as all sorts of patterns. That's just another one there. Oh, no, you're all right. You're okay. There we go. Here we have an example of a high ISO low light JPEG compression, what will give you an illusion of an apparition in the figure. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Oh no, he's gone. You can see it? Oh no. Back you go. Yeah. There we go. Can you see it there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was actually one of mine at Holy Trinity Church years and years ago, and I just started out. Next one. When you zoom in, you degrade the image, unfortunately, and what you can see appears to be an apparition, when in fact it was a combination of two gravestones and the hedge behind it. But because of the digital noise and the matrixing, we think we've captured a ghost. So it looks like a figure of a woman, doesn't it? And you're in a notoriously haunted graveyard, so it's a ghost. Here we have an image that was in the press, what appears to be a figure of a woman standing on the roof of Sudbury Lunatic Asylum. Next one. I don't know if you can see it there. Standing on the roof. And the next one. Again, we see the combination of low light, high ISO and distorted cropped image of what appears to be a woman on the roof, when in fact the ghostly female patient turns out to be chimney stack. So you can see how easily you can be fooled in these low light conditions with a high noise image. Right, and the next one I'm going to talk to you about reflections. Now this, unfortunately I can't name the location, The Haunted Devon members that were there will be very aware of this and the amount of work that went into this. This was at a recce of a National Trust property. They'd asked us to come in and investigate because they wanted more evidence for their Halloween ghost tours. So they had their basic ghost stories, but they wanted to find a little bit more evidence. And Sally actually took this image, and as you can see, we have something standing next to me between the bedpost and the bed cover. Next one. Pretty impressive capture. You've got a figure there of a male that looks like he's dressed in a 17th century doublet. So you've got the right dress period, you've got the features, you can see him quite clearly, you can see that hasn't been faked or put into the image. And he even resembled the actual ancestral portrait of that time. And I think we have a side-by-side of his face. There we go. Only trouble with that was we had a reflective perspex panel on the wall protecting the wallpaper, because behind there was a secret passage and people put their hands on the wallpaper and look behind. Now, we could have taken that as, oh my god, we've caught the most amazing ghost ever. It matches the costume of the period, and it also looks very, very, very much like the ancestral owner of the home. Unfortunately, that wasn't good enough for us. So when we went back to do the investigation, we went to recreate this to make sure that it wasn't our member's reflection. And we got some professional lighting, because this was taken at midday, so the light would be at the highest point. And obviously we were going back within the evening, we wouldn't have been able to create the same light conditions. So we got some professional lighting and we tried to recreate it. Sally.
Right, you need to put it on manual, so it's a full manual. Right, you want ISO 500. Right, so you need to take a smidgen step forward. There. Christina, can you just go a bit this way, smidge, please? Forward, forward, in one step. I have my hair tied up. Yeah. Right, take a step to your left.
We even made her wear the same clothes.
Back a tiny, tiny bit, like a half step. It's too bright. Look how dark it is. 2.8. Yeah, natural. Natural, yeah? Yeah.
So we're trying to recreate the exact camera settings that we used for the
Right, that line needs to come down a bit. We've got something. That light's too high. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's better. Ben, can you... No, that's right. The light's perfect now, Ben. If you can stand back where you were, you want 2.8. Didn't go it's
You can tell who the bossy one is, can't you?
That's it.
Yeah, John, you need to stand in front of the camera. That's it, that's perfect. I'd say you step back a little bit. Kelly. Oh no. Right, okay, now I was... Yeah. With your phone on. Down a little bit more, and that's it. Okay, I've taken a cup. Done it.
We were trying to debunk this photo of a figure that we caught between there and there, because it could have been Christina's reflection in the perspex here. So let's see if we've got it. It's not there. No, we didn't actually capture the image itself, but we did actually get Christina's reflection within the filmed footage, as you can see there. So that one wasn't a ghost, although that would have been an amazing capture, but it's one of those ones that's just a little bit too good to be true. So you always got to be critical, as we are most critical of our own evidence, so yes. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are some anomalous photos. I'm not saying there's no such thing as an anomalous photo. Here we have Well, you can't really see it on that slide. But here we have some shadow figures that were taken in the Plymouth Rail Risk building of that corridor. It was myself and Kelly. It was before the investigation started and we were just going around taking photos. Kelly was stood behind me. I was using my Fuji camera, which I've actually converted into an infrared, so it'll take infrared stills. I took 2 photos, the flash didn't go off, and we had a battery drain straight afterwards. So if you show the next image, you can see it. There was no one down there at the time, and what you can see is appears to be a woman holding a child with another one next to it. And the next one. And you can't see that. And the next one. And as you can see, she's actually changed position within the 2 successive shots. We can't explain that. There's nothing down there that would cause that. There was nothing that could block out the light like that. That door is very, very reflective. You can see a reflection in there. That's because we have our CCTV set up at the end of that corridor because, yeah, we get a hell of a lot of activity down there. We've had things thrown. We had that.
What was it?
Plymouth Railway Station. It was in the Risk building, which is not open to the public, and yeah, it was before the main team arrived. We were just going around setting up, and I was actually just taking some shots of the location. Later that night, we got an EVP of a child mimicking me and Kelly singing a Tissue from Ring a Ring of Roses. We've also had other figures appear in that area, as well as things thrown and a whole host of other activity. Yes, well, I've said that, the plug blowing up on the CCTV. The camera turned on once, do you remember? It was flashing the light and, when no one was down there, when we had the Connect cam on the go. Yeah. And over the years, we've been investigating that area. It turns out it was the poorhouse graveyard. So, next one. This one was taken at Whitsands Bay Fort at a recce in 2015. Paul turned out the lights in the underground battery to show us what it was going to be like. I was picking up on a male energy behind me at the end of the corridor, which would have been there. Kelly snapped off a photo, her flash didn't go off again. Not that she just turned off a flash, it just didn't go off. When she took another snap, you can see, there is nothing we can see that would cause that shadow figure. The only light that was visible is from a very, very small air vent that you can't see there that was casting light on that back wall. And we couldn't get anywhere near that area because of the wood that was there. Now it does look like he's carrying a gun. It does seem like he's wearing a blast helmet, but it was a very, very fortunate positioned piece of wood that looks like he's carrying his rifle there. But that shadow figure has been seen on many investigations that have been reported by different teams, and we were just lucky enough to capture it, but we couldn't figure out what had caused that shadow. And I think you're going to talk about the next one, Kelly, because you know about the next one more than I do.
Friend.
Your friend. And the next one?
So this was a photo that was captured by an old member. It was right at the end of the investigation. Again, this is Plymouth train station.
That
we
corridor
were
again.
literally on the way out, and she just walked past, and she just went click as we walked down that corridor, and off she went. And she then sent this in to us. And can anyone see what is possibly in that footage, in that picture? You look in. So earlier in the night, I believe, I'm sure you were there with Liz as well. We were talking to a little girl, I believe her name was Hannah.
I think so, yeah.
We spoke to her quite a lot throughout the night. And yeah, this footage this picture just kind of appeared out of absolute nowhere. I don't know if you've got a zoomed in.
Next one.
Next slide.
You can't zoom it in anymore because the image degrades and the noise.
Yeah. But yeah, you can zoom in on your phones and things.
Yeah.
So you can see this. She's side profile. She's got short bobbed hair. Looks like she's got a little coat on. So it's practically like a full-bodied apparition. A lot of people say they can see faces and things if you can get the picture up on a smaller device next to her. But again, that I would put that down to matrix in. But this one definitely, there is absolutely nothing down that corridor. Where she stood, she's also blocking out the doorway
And the light, yeah.
and the light, so you can see where the doorway is, that she is actually blocking out part of the doorway. So yeah, she's a very interesting find, bless her.
And that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
3 shots should you take if you're taking stills?
Yes, it is best practice to take 3 shots if you're taking stills, again away from you, but again with things like dust particles and stuff like that, with air current flow they can actually move between shots. But it is best practice to take 3 shots if possible. As she said, she just literally snapped this off as we were closing up the building. So the rest of the team have
We were
gone.
literally leaving to
Yeah.
go home, she just went, just walked.
With regards to like reflections and stuff,
Yeah.
is it advisable not to wear like jewel, because I've got like a wedding ring with diamonds in it and things like that. Is it worth not wearing those things to investigations?
Or just turn them round.
Or turn them round.
Turn them
Because
round,
I know
yeah.
watch has got diamonds on it
Yeah,
and stuff
yeah.
as well.
I mean,
so-
you are going to get reflective stuff everywhere. I mean, we didn't have time to cover it, but we were going to go into thermal images, and if you're next to a reflective surface or even reflective paint, glossy paint, if you're using a thermal imaging camera and you're standing next to a wall, you can actually create a figure behind you from your own thermal reflection. So with using any kind of imaging technology, it's always best practice just to try and rule out the environmental and the mechanical before you jump into the paranormal. If you can rule all that out and then you've still got something, fantastic. That's what we want to see.
That picture of the little girl is actually on here, so if you want to close look at it.
I think the shadow figures are as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And digital cameras, do they create more anomalies?
They do, yes. Yeah, do 35mm in your film. You didn't get the orbs, and you don't get the digital noise. It is purely, as we've upgraded to digital technology, we've started to see these artefacts appear, and that's why they've been so prominent in the paranormal field, because they weren't there on the old film cameras. And Graham, who is into imaging technology, that's his job.
Yeah, I actually developed image sensors in semiconductors. So one of the things you will get, excuse me, one of the things you will find with digital imaging, you will get something where you have the photon which goes into the cell. Sometimes you will get leakage of the electron which has been converted from the photon into another pixel beside it, because the pixels are so dense nowadays. Sometimes you get this electron migration of the photon going in, and it just creates another fake image of itself, and you can get all sorts of weird image anomalies with digital imaging now because of it, because the pixels are so dense nowadays. So be careful with digital imaging because of that very reason. A lot of paranormal photography, they actually really like to use film cameras for that very reason, because of the weird anomalies and effects you get with digital imaging. So yeah, I mean, make what you will of it. I mean, photography is photography, and your brain interprets the information that you see in the photograph, and you can make any old stuff up if you want to. So it's an interesting field, but good to see you putting out all the real facts there, and and everything else. Then try and make as you will from it, and hope that you've got something interesting. Thanks, Devon.
Thank you.